Mr. Khali, I would like to invite you to ask your questions. You had two questions, please.
Thank you. Actually, I had sent you, Professor Chomsky, I had sent you two questions of mine, but if I can change my questions to another question, which I thought more relevant, because I'm an English teacher. When I go to my classes, the first thing my students will ask me, of course, after coronavirus, is a gist of this talk we had here. Your universal grammar is understandable for us people of academia, people who are in the profession, but for ordinary people, because some people believe that science has to be simplified to the extent that ordinary people can understand. And I want to hear it in your own words. How do you simplify universal grammar so that my school students also understand what that means? Thank you.
Well, let's take another human faculty. Let's take the faculty of vision. Okay, we can all see. I can see you. When I look at you, I see a person. Actually, what's hitting my retina is not a person. My eyes are carrying out what's called saccadic motion, seeing different spots on the screen in front of me. But somehow, out of this sequence of random spots, which are not part of my consciousness, my mind is working away and it's presenting an image of a person. How does that happen? How are we able to do this? Well, there's only one possibility. It's nothing that we've learned. Okay, it turns out that experience is relevant to it. We know this from experiments with animals, like cats. If you deprive a kitten of structured visual stimuli in the first weeks of its life, it goes blind. It has to have structured, patterned stimulation in the first weeks of its life, and that triggers an innate, genetically determined capacity, which then goes on to produce this amazing capacity.
Chomsky, for the insightful comments. I think Professor Krashen has some comments to add. So Professor Krashen, would you please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to comment on the relationship between implicit and explicit knowledge, of course. When I was a graduate student at UCLA, which was the center of Chomskyan research, we were taught the theory, and it was obvious to me and everyone else, I now know this was dead wrong, that all we had to do was learn all about the latest descriptions of grammar from MIT and apply them to the classroom. I remember when Paul Kaparsky's papers came out, and we were all charmed by his analysis, factives, etc. I remember going over to my colleagues, I was also teaching English as a second language, saying, we now know how to teach this structure. We simply give people the rule that Professor Kaparsky came up with and give them exercises where they can practice it, correct them, and everything will be fine. We have the last 45 years of my life is showing the limits of explicit knowledge. It's simply not that way at all. We had the assumption that the language acquisition device turned off at puberty, which was the result of a really beautiful argument of Eric Lenneberg, which I now think is totally wrong, even though I have huge admiration for Lenneberg's work because he asked the right question. As Professor Chomsky has said many times, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. Lenneberg was wrong, but it really pushed us ahead. It was wonderful. He claimed that when you reach puberty, things happen in the brain. The left side goes to the left, the right side goes to the right, and acquisition, implicit learning cannot happen. Everything is explicit.
Once again, hello, Professor, and thank you for your time. This is an honor of 1,000 lifetime. I got this question. According to the basics of universal grammar and poverty of stimulus, I want to ask you how influential behaviorism was on developing universal grammar.
It was very influential in providing a foil go back to the actual origins. We were Harvard University, center of hardcore behaviorism, radical behaviorism, when there were actually 3 graduate students who became close friends. Eric Lenneberg, Morris Halley, recently met at Harvard as grad students who became close friends. We shared, at the time, the conception of language was basically B.F. Skinner's verbal behavior. Hadn't been published yet, but it was an influential figure, a prominent, important philosopher. He brought this hook, line, and sinker. That's the basis of his philosophy of language, extraordinarily influential.
I wanted to communicate this message to Professor Chomsky and Professor Krashen, that this generosity of yours has inspired a lot of people here, and now we feel connected, Professor Chomsky and Professor Krashen. And this is wonderful, because it's very important for everyone in the world to know that they matter. And what you did today actually made us feel that we matter in the profession, and thank you so much for that. Words really fail me to thank you. And I see this action of yours and Professor Krashen as disseminating knowledge beyond borders. Actually, there is no border now. We can have online meetings with you and Professor Krashen and other people in the world. I am so thankful to Professor Chomsky so much.